Welcome to Mighty Line Minute. Today we're answering a common question from safety pros and warehouse leaders. Are hard hats really required in warehousing? Let's unpack it. Angie, what's your take on this question?
Well, Alex, I've seen everything, from no hard hats to bump caps to full hard hat use, but many warehouses don't require them.
Sometimes warehouses follow the adjacent manufacturing plant's PPE rules, or visitors may have to wear hard hats and high-vis clothing during tours. But what do the regulations say about their use in distribution centers or warehouses in general?
Under OSHA, hard hats aren't automatically required. Section 1910.135 mandates head protection only when employees face potential head injury from falling objects, impacts, or electrical risks. So it's hazard-based, not location-based.
So the same logic also applies to other PPE, like impact-resistant or static dissipated footwear or protective eyewear, for example.
Exactly. OSHA requires ASTM-tested footwear when there's a risk of foot injury, but it always comes back to the workplace hazard assessment. That determines what PPE is actually needed.
And what about other countries?
The UK follows a similar approach. The Health and Safety Executive requires a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. PPE is needed only if risks can't be controlled by other means following the hierarchy of controls. Eliminate, engineer, administer, then PPE. Canada is similar. Provinces require due diligence, hazard identification, and documented assessments in higher risk areas.
So what exactly do regulators look for?
They'll typically check 1. Whether a hazard assessment was done. 2. If it's competent and current. 3. Whether conditions changed. 4. If reasonable controls were implemented. Therefore, documentation is essential.
Help our listeners understand this in practice.
Think overhead pallet racking. Falling objects, damaged pallets, loose cartons pose real risk. Regulators may expect hard hats, but with solid engineering controls, secure racking, standardized loads, forklift overhead protection, exclusion zones, regular inspections, visual warnings, and training, hard hats may not be necessary. With that, here are 5 steps to include in a proper hazard assessment. Identify hazards. Evaluate likelihood and severity. Apply the hierarchy of controls. Document conclusions. And review the hazard assessment periodically or when operations change. It should always be led or accomplished by a competent person, someone trained and authorized. Documentation is critical in the US, UK, and Canada.
And what about employee comfort?
Mandatory hard hats in low-risk areas can reduce buy-in. Even today's lighter vented helmets can feel unnecessary. The best approach is transparency. Explain the hazard assessment and why protection is or isn't needed. Finally, regarding the overall risk to employers and operators, an accident doesn't always mean a violation. Regulators focus on risk, foreseeability, and reasonableness. Management should demonstrate a competent, documented, up-to-date hazard assessment, consideration of industry standards, feasible engineering and administrative controls, and ongoing inspections and corrective actions.
Angie, what's the bottom line here?
Hard hats aren't always required in warehousing, though they very well could be as a function of the site's hazard or risk assessment. Remember, recognizing hazards is always required, and it must be done formally and professionally. Ask yourself, did we reasonably identify and control foreseeable risks? This applies to all PPE: foot, hand, eye, hearing, temperature extremes, and more. Use the hierarchy of controls, document your assessments, and communicate clearly. That's how you keep employees safe while ensuring any gear provided is appropriate and fits the actual hazard without going overboard. In other words, do your very best to engineer out the hazard in the first place. There you go, Alex. That's a wrap.
Thanks, Angie, and thanks to everyone listening. Stay safe, and for more tips on keeping your warehouse safe and efficient, visit mightylinetape.com. When it comes to your floors and your safety, we've got you covered.